Hello and welcome everyone to the School of MIT Sloan session at Interview Prep. My name is Kanika Jain and I'll be your host. It's my pleasure to introduce Lisa. We'll begin with a presentation and followed by live question and answers. Please post your questions in the chat. Over to you, Lisa.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Liza Wheel. I'm the founder of Gatehouse Admissions, and I am an MIT Sloan MBA alum myself. So I always love giving any presentations on Sloan, especially the Sloan interview. So today's session will be helping you crack the MIT Sloan interview. So we're going to jump right in, and as Kanika said, we'll have some room at the end of the session for Q&A. So please note your questions down, keep them coming, and we will have some time for it. But really, just kind of quickly, why are you guys here? Why are you here today? It's to dominate in your MIT Sloan admissions interview. If you have been actually for round 2, you probably don't yet know if you've been interviewed or if you will be interviewed. You'll know likely, depending on when you watch this, the 3rd week of February for round 2. And if you are watching this much later and referencing back, you'll hear from the school in late October about round 1. So wherever you are in the process, this can be a great session to just orient yourselves of what is MIT Sloan looking for in the interview process. And I would say, before we jump in, I want to just tell you why I am your secret weapon in really understanding the MIT Sloan interview. Number one, I went through it myself, albeit a very long time ago. I was interviewed in my when I was pursuing my MBA and applying to MBAs, and actually attended MIT Sloan. So I have a sense of the ethos at Sloan. I'm a former Bain & Co. management consultant, but more importantly for all of you, I have been coaching people on the admissions process to business school for over 20 years, and am really proud of the over 150 5-star reviews that I have on GMAT Club, and have also founded a company, Gatehouse Admissions. It's a boutique firm that's really focused on the top schools. And I'm also a fan of putting my expertise down on paper or video and then giving it away. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of it. Even creating these videos and these books and articles, they take time and research, which just puts me in a better position to help you. But I encourage you to follow not only GMAT Club on YouTube, but definitely Gatehouse Admissions as well. Visit our website. There's so much good content out there. I'm certainly proud of it and would encourage you to take advantage of it. But that's why I'm here. But let's just jump into the good stuff. Okay, so first, let's orient ourselves. Let's talk about Sloan. It is one of the hardest business schools to get into. It really, the way I think about it is like basically there's Stanford, Harvard. Sloan's the 3rd hardest school in terms of acceptance rate. Depending on the year, it kind of changed a little bit during COVID. But in general, in any year, Sloan will receive somewhere, 5, 6, sometimes even 7,000 applications, and only about 1,000 of those applicants will make it to the interview stage. And then really only about 400 people that they actually interview will apply. So it's a pretty low acceptance rate. It depends a little bit on the year, but traditionally it's about 20 to 25% of Sloan applicants are interviewed, and then somewhere about 10 to 12% of overall applicants are actually accepted. So it's an extraordinarily competitive process. It's a smaller program, and it's just got such a great reputation in technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship that it makes it a popular program. But as such, it's hard to get in. So that's what this is all about. But I want to start by reminding all of you that Sloan, I think, is great because they spend a lot of time in telling you what they want. And it's not so easy to be like, okay, do I have X, Y, Z? I'm in. But instead, I believe they give you a good mindset for you to have as you embark on your entire Sloan application process. So this language is pulled directly from the cover letter that Sloan asks for as part of its application process. And I'm going to read it just quickly so we are all thinking the same thing. MIT Sloan seeks students whose personal characteristics demonstrate that they will make the most of the incredible opportunities at MIT, both academic and non-academic. We are on a quest to find those whose presence will enhance the experience of other students. That's important. We seek thoughtful leaders, that's important, with exceptional intellectual abilities, important, and the drive and determination to put their stamp on the world. Again, important. We welcome people who are independent, authentic, and fearlessly creative, true doers. We want people who can redefine solutions to conventional problems and strive to preempt unconventional dilemmas with cutting edge ideas. We demand integrity and respect passion. To me, if I had to zero in, I'd say we want people who can redefine solutions to conventional problems and strive to preempt unconventional dilemmas with cutting edge ideas. Sloan is really looking for people who will put their mark on the world, and that comes in large part through problem solving. So I mention that now because even like if you read this before going into your interview, it will help you keep these themes in mind. You don't have to reference it, you don't have to use words from it, but it will just help you be in the mindset of Sloan even through your interview process. So that's a headline I encourage everybody to keep in mind. One of the things that makes Sloan unique in its interview process is it asks you, when you receive your interview invitation, you will also be asked to submit, you got it, another essay. You thought you were done, you are not. So you have to turn in your essay, I think it's 48 hours before, might be 24, 48 or 24 hours before your actual interview. But the nice thing is that Sloan has already previewed what this question will be. And it's perhaps not surprising if you think about Sloan, what their question is, but it's all around data. So they're interested in learning more about how you use data to make decisions and analyze results. And then you have an option, and you can choose your own adventure. You can either select an existing data visualization and in 250 words, or less, explain why it matters to you. Or, as it says, examples may come from current events, business analysis, or personal research. Or in 250 words or less, please describe a recent data-driven decision you had to make and include one slide presenting your analysis. The slide may include a data visualization example and should present data in a professional context. So what they're just trying to assess is, so much of business school in general, not just at Sloan, but any of these business schools, analytics, critical thinking, fluency with numbers, but interpretation of numbers is really important. So Sloan has added this and communicating that. Some people are extraordinarily good at the numbers, but struggle to communicate what they mean to others. Some people are really good at storytelling, but less good at the critical thinking that backs up the storytelling. So by sharing an example of data with the school, the school is getting another window into who you are and whether or not you'll be able to succeed in the classroom and beyond. So, and can often be part of the interview as well. But I want to give you some tips. And I just grabbed this bar chart right off of Google. I said, give me an example of a bar chart, and I'm going to copy it in here. And I did that intentionally because you are not trying to give the Sloan admissions team an eye chart with all sorts of, really intense, complex, this beautiful graph that somebody on the outside is going to be like, what? I'm not saying you have to go ridiculously simple either, but know that the exercise isn't to test your PowerPoint or graphing skills, okay? I want you to hear that. It is much more to understand why is the data important to you? What did you do with the data? Why is it relevant? So it could be as simple as a bar chart. When I think it was like the second year that Sloan came out with this essay question, a client of mine was really wrestling with this and had all these complex graphs. And at the end of the day, what we aligned on was a simple bar chart because it really enabled a decision of his. And so I want to share these other tips. Choose something that is important to you. That's really important. So think about, again, not showing off cool graphics, but something that can tell the school more about you. and level up with it when explaining. So for example, if I were to explain in my 250 words, this bar chart graph, I wouldn't be like, the first column shows this, the second column shows that, the third column shows that. They can see that. Instead, what's the bigger picture? Why was this simple bar chart something that enabled a path forward or helped illustrate a problem? And really remember that this is a test of your communication and explanation skills, not your ability to do complicated slides or elegant slides. It's really just, okay, how can you present data in a way that someone from the outside can understand? And then how can you explain it? And very often, especially, well, actually either of the options. By the way, it doesn't matter if you choose option 1 or option 2. But it really is an opportunity to showcase more about you in that 250 word write-up. So you might want to showcase a work win, something that you weren't able to tell the school about in the cover letter and the rest of the application. Maybe it is a time to showcase more of a passion of yours. So if your career goals are to make a pivot into a new space, maybe you want to break into more something like consumer retail, and you have a graph showing how much more online, how much more what's the word I'm looking? Retail happens digitally versus in bricks and mortar. And maybe that's your graph. And it's just how you really want to use your MBA to shore up your digital marketing skills. I have no idea. It could be a growth story. When I mentioned my client who had a really simple bar graph, it was based on a survey they had done on some, on sort of what, they didn't realize that there was a marketing angle that could be applied more for males or more for females until they did a simple analysis to see what resonated better with different populations. And that basically untapped an entirely new market strategy. So, it's so much more than the data. It can be such an opportunity for you to tell them more about you. It's my biggest headline with this. But the other reason why I don't want it overly complex is very often the actual interview will be a question about the data that you submitted. They'll say, why did you choose this data? Walk me through it. So you also want to make sure, again, that you're not trying to show them this really complex slide that you would never be able to walk them through in shorter than a few minutes. That just wouldn't serve you well. So be thoughtful about that too, because you could be called on to explain why this is so meaningful to you, why it's important to you. So once you're done with your essay, you've submitted it, then you're going in for the interview. And I want to cover off on the interview. So for the interview itself, assume around 30 minutes, but as always, it can vary a little bit. It could be closer to 45, it could be closer to 20. It's most often conducted by a member of the admissions team, sometime a core member, sometime a sort of extended member of the admissions team. Don't try to read anything in it. There's nothing, you're not, because it's a member of the admissions team, you're not usually given information too far in advance. You're not going to be expected to do too much research on them in terms of their own career. They're going to mostly know Sloan. This third point, they're an informed interviewer. What I mean by this is that they will have read your entire application. This is actually quite rare in the world of business school interviews. Most interviews are what we call blind. They're only, the interviewer only has access to your resume. However, at Sloan, they will have read your entire application. So you just want to be aware, remember what it is you've already told them in your application. However, this does not mean you cannot touch on any of the stories that you mentioned in your application. I think it's important to note that Sloan has a very, very short written application. They have a 300-word cover letter. They have a 250-word essay about the world that shaped you. You have your 2 video essays. You don't have a lot of room to have told them a lot. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I mentioned this in my cover letter. I cannot mention it in my interview. You should feel free to mention really whatever you want. I think that because they, over the years, have made their application shorter and shorter, that gives you a little bit more ability to mention things in the interview that you mentioned in your application. That said, it's still important to know that they know your application. They will have read it. In terms of the interview, it's really what's essential to know are the basics. I call them the basics. It's like and we'll go through this in a little bit more detail, like walk me through your resume, the standard questions. There's a very good chance that you will get those. And then the other thing that I think makes Sloan's interview a little unique is that they really do often ask behavioral or story essays. In fact, they were I think one of really the first to rely so heavily on behavioral interview questions, like tell me about a time. Now they balance it out with other questions, but I think any prep work you do for a Sloan interview, it would be incomplete if you're not working on your stories. So let's dig into the buckets of the Sloan interview. All right, so the types of questions. These are the essential. These are the basics. These are you have to be ready to answer these questions. Full stop. And I want you to practice out loud. Walk me through your resume. What are your goals? Why do you want to pursue your MBA? Why do you want to pursue your MBA at Sloan? And how will you contribute to Sloan? These, at first blush, even though I said they're basics, I actually probably the better word is the essentials. These interview questions are really hard. We have so much prep on them online that I suggest you check out because these are questions that you are likely to get at a lot of schools, but I don't want you to take it for granted that you can answer these questions strategically and well without practice. Each of these questions has nuance and strategies associated with them. So definitely invest in making sure that you can walk somebody through your resume, highlighting the things that you want to highlight in a way that's going to stick with them. But that's kind of the first bucket of questions. I could spend hours on, I could probably spend an hour on any one of these questions. I'm going to focus more on the stories because I think those are special to Sloan, and they even take more practice, or they're not something that will always come up in a business school interview. So these are the story essays that tell me about a time. Tell me about your biggest accomplishment. Tell me about a time you drove impact, a time when you had a difficult time working with someone. Tell me about the data pack you submitted. These are opportunities really designed to give Sloan a way to see you in action. They want to understand how you solve problems, how you work with others, and stories, specific examples can illustrate that much better than just commenting on, well, I'm really easy to work with people, or, I'm a team player. That's a kind of a hard thing to understand without context. So stories give you an opportunity to share more context, but also give Sloan a really good window into who you are. And then with Sloan, you also need to be ready for challenge questions. You need to be ready for off-book questions. What I mean by this is these are customized more to you. Why did you transition from this firm to that firm? Why did you major in X? Why did you go to university Y? Describe your day-to-day. These questions are often just really specific to you and where Sloan might want to explore further. Look, these are also questions you should know the answers to, meaning they're all about you. So you're in a better position here because it's off book, because it's not necessarily a question that's asked to everybody, because not everybody has transitioned from firm Y to Z, for example, but only you have. It's smart to think about your decisions, but the good thing is even if you get caught off guard with one of these things, it's all about you. So you're a little bit more in control. But some of the other challenge questions are things like, what are two of your weaknesses? When is the time that you failed? When is the time where you were given negative feedback? What other schools are you applying to? And any questions for us. Again, these are somewhat the latter half of these after the off-book questions, which are a little more unique to Sloan. These, I would say, spend some time looking at line. Definitely at our resources. We have a lot on interview prep on these. But again, I'm going to focus on the stories. All right. So as I said, they're designed to see you in action. And Here is how to attack them. And I cannot stress this enough. You should be practicing STAR every time before an interview. STAR: situation, task, action, results, and reflection. This is critical, all 5 steps. I've seen this in only 4 steps: situation, task, action, results. That is insufficient. Remember that business school is all designed about your own growth. So reflection gives you an opportunity to show that you can recognize your own growth and you can recognize what you've learned from a different situation. So do not forget that second R. Situation: describe the event or situation you were in. Task: like what was the challenge? What were you tasked to do? Or like what was the goal? So here's the situation, here's what I had to do. The action: this is incredibly important. I see people very often, just kind of shortchange their actions, but the actions are the things that really show the beauty of who you are. So describe the specific actions you took to complete the task and the why, your sort of mindset behind them. Then you want to make sure that you end the story with the results. Here's what happened, hopefully good. And then share some reflection. Study the slide, remember the slide, use it whenever you are describing to Sloan different things that tell me about a times that you've gone through. I want to share an example, just illustrate it. This can be like, tell me a time that you took initiative. Situation: about a year after I started at ABC, I realized we had grown very fast. The accounting department had tripled in size, which was exciting, but at the same time, we were losing a sense of family that ABC had been known for. So I decided on my own to get it back. So that's kind of the situation. I thought about different ways to do that and finally hit on starting a department-wide Slack channel that would let us stay connected even while we were busy. That's the task, right? That's the goal. That's the outcome I was seeking. Now the actions. First, I sent out a survey asking what individual channels people would want. Then I worked with IT to make sure we could even deploy it, which was tricky because we have all these elements. We're in accounting. People are nervous about what we put on a Slack. Then I organized a launch event. I did X, Y, and Z to make it happen, which was also a little tricky. Results: we have 37 channels today, ranging from X to Y, recipe exchanges, technical advice. Every employee has logged in at least 4 times a week, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, our turnover is the lowest in 4 years, or lowest ever. Reflection: for me, not particularly on the cutting edge of technology, it was really fun to do something that I got to explore a new side. And I also, learned how important it is to earn buy-in. So all I'm doing there is really kind of bringing somebody in to my world, walking through what I did, being explicit about the actions I took. And the other thing to note that you heard me do, and I even allude to it on the slide, this was tricky because if something feels easy, it's not an interesting story. Why would you be telling it? But you take for granted, perhaps, why something was tricky, like we're supposed to know. Make sure we know if there were challenges, conflict, whatever it might be. Take a moment to make sure that the listener can appreciate the challenges that you faced. So that's one example. I want to just one more example, and then we're pretty, we've got a few more minutes. I think plenty of time for questions, but handling the challenging failure story. So I want to call out this one. And I could have also done this with the conflict one, but I'm going to do it on the failure one. Choose a story in which you indeed failed. This is important. It should be a failure that you were in control of, meaning it's not a failure of not knowing something that you couldn't have known. It has to be something that you actually have ownership of having done differently. And then ideally the failure is not only about you. I failed a test. I didn't get the promotion. Those are obviously failures for you personally, but they didn't really affect anybody else, right? You want to choose a failure that had ramifications that extend beyond you. Own the failure. I was actually doing a mock interview just before this session, and I heard somebody say, I asked about a weakness in this case, and they said something like, I forget what the weakness was. Maybe I say yes too much, and then they said something like, it's understandable because I get asked for a lot. what you did right there, what happened right there is the person kind of said, like, it's understandable that I have this weakness. Just own the weakness. It's fine. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to reveal weaknesses. By the way, it makes us a lot more human and likable. Nobody wants a perfectionist like what we just, we want to be human. So it's okay to have those warts. So, own the failure. That doesn't mean making it sound bigger than it was, but don't downplay it or excuse it by pushing it on others. And then show that you've learned from your mistake. All right, I want to show you in action. This is actually a failure that yours truly made years ago. I've kind of cleaned it up, but my second year as a consultant, I was our office leader for our annual United Way fundraiser for the junior consultants. I needed to keep our office head, a very senior partner, apprised of our progress. On a weekly basis, I sent him a brief deck with updates. He was giving a presentation for the office, so I sent him a summary of our progress. About 20 minutes afterwards, I noticed an error in my numbers. I immediately let him know via email and sent him a revised set of materials. He wasn't happy, but he did say, and he really did say, no harm, no foul, because I corrected the issue before he gave the presentation. However, I'm not saying you should choose a numbers thing. The reason that this failure was big for me is this is the office head, and we were in the business of numbers. For me to make a muff up and send to our office head, it demonstrated a lack of professionalism, a carelessness on my part. As a consultant, I'm only trusted when my numbers can be trusted, even if it's not for a client engagement. So from then on out, I worked extra hard to double check my remaining updates, to even pressure test them with colleagues. And over time, I got much more zero defect in my work. So own it. It was my fault. And explain what you've done to correct it, and move on. But, don't be afraid of the challenge, the failure, or the conflict essays or questions, because we're all imperfect. That's why you're headed to business school. All right. So a few more things. When you prep, so you don't know what questions they're going to ask. Are they going to ask you about accomplishment, about a failure, about a time that you worked on a team, about a time when you mentored somebody, about a time when you worked with somebody who was challenging? You don't know. So almost forget about those things. But what you do know, and what you should know, are your stories. So know your resume. This perhaps sounds obvious, but I want you, before your interview with Sloan, to look at every single every single bullet on your resume, and know the context, know the who, what, where, when, why, how of each one. What was the context of the effort that you're mentioning in that one bullet? What were you trying to achieve? Who else was involved? Was it a solo effort? Did you have to get buy-in? Were you directly managing someone? Who was the hardest person to work with, for example? What challenges did you face? How did you resolve those challenges, right? That's all that's the actions. What were the primary and secondary results? What were the results more for the business? What was the result perhaps for you? And how did you grow from the experience? You should, by doing this, in effect, develop 8 to 10 stories that you can serve up based on whatever question is asked. But it's imperative you do this. And then, because a failure probably isn't on your resume, make sure that you do prep those weaknesses and failure questions ahead of time as well. But I can't tell you how often people go into an interview not having really thought about what's on their resume. All the answers are there. You just have to invest the time in thinking about them ahead of time. All right. So final MIT Sloan preps. Know what they know. Read your application before your interview. It's just like reading the resume, read your essays, read that mantra from Sloan that I put on the first slide. It kind of just keeps everything more top of mind. But if you reread your application, you know what they know. So you just know what their understanding about you already is. Be yourself. It is so hard to be yourself. I think we can just, we get in our heads with this moment. We think it's so high stakes. Be yourself, be authentic. Don't be afraid to be imperfect, and don't be afraid to be proud of the things that you have achieved. Know your interview essay, know that data submission that you put together, and know why it was meaningful. Practice running through explaining that data to somebody else, because you might need to explain it to your interviewer. Remember why and how you got to where you are. Think about the decisions, why you left firm A to join firm B. Think of those inflection points that are apparent on your resume that might not have a bullet associated with them, but think about the context of how you made the decisions at each stop along the way. And then lastly, have questions for your interviewer. You will absolutely have time for questions and they will expect that you have them. So it's best to think about those questions ahead of time so that you're not caught unawares in the interview. All right, I think that's it. And so we have now some time for questions, exactly on 30 minutes. That was my goal. But I will say this, just I'll highlight some other things on the slide before I turn it over for questions. Definitely reach out to Gatehouse Admissions if you would like to learn more about your specific situation. If you want a mock interview specifically for Sloan, perhaps with me. I love Sloan mock interviews. But we're also happy to do a free consultation. And then definitely I encourage all of you to follow us on socials. We have a lot of stuff out there. But with that, let me turn it over for any questions you have. Kanika, do we have anything from the
Yeah,
audience?
we do. So, first question is, in data presentation, should always be personal. Can I share some research paper or white paper patent paper that I published recently?
Yes, you can. I think that can be a good idea, but here's my caution or my advice on this. I want you to make sure the story is bigger than it was hard for me to get this data or it was a big discovery. Remember that business school is about people, leading people, circumventing challenges, teamwork. So if there's an opportunity, so it can be about a novel discovery, but you're not just trying to prove to Sloan that you are smart. You are also trying, and in fact, I would say sometimes if you are smart and you do a lot of research, there is going to be a concern or a test. Can this person equally work with people? So use your 250 words to tell a story about the bigger journey of publishing the paper, getting the research, figuring out the resources to use, presenting to your professor. I have no idea what it is, but make it more than you conducting experiments, writing by yourself, if that makes sense.
Next question. Will you get asked? I guess you've already answered it, though I'm still quoting it.
Yep.
Will you get asked about your essays, or are challenge questions just about your profile or resume experiences?
Yes, so you could totally get questions about your essay. Primarily, they're unlikely to ask something. Yeah, they're unlikely, based on what we've seen recently, they're unlikely to ask specifically like, why did you write what you wrote in your cover letter? They might, if you wrote something really, I don't know, random. But they are likely to ask about the data interview, the data essay. So not a traditionally, again, any of this could depend on who you get, the year, but typically they don't ask specific questions of like, in your cover letter, you wrote this, what did you mean? But they could do that for the data. And then what was the rest of the question about the challenge questions, Kanika?
Or challenge questions just about you and what is appropriate. Sorry, I messed up. Or are challenge questions just about your resume or profile experiences?
Challenge questions could also be about weaknesses, about conflicts. I think that one question we didn't discuss on this just because of time is, tell me about a time you worked with somebody who was struggling to keep up, or tell me about a time that there was a conflict. And those are hard questions because my biggest advice, what I always say is you want to appreciate the other person's point of view. That's kind of what they're testing for. Are you willing to compromise? Are you willing to meet someone halfway? Are you willing to recognize there are things that you could do to change? It's not just on someone else to change. So I call those a challenge question. But in general, what they're not going to be doing, they're not going to be testing. They're not going to be testing your, it's not like a case interview. There's no kind of challenge questions like that. I call them challenge questions because they do require some savviness and strategic communication, but they're not like a interview case prep question.
Okay. Next question. This is kind of interesting one. What types of questions do you typically recommend asking admission after an interview? particularly if interviewer did not personally attend the program, and what is the appropriate scope?
Okay. So headlines on questions to ask anyone. Your goal, remember this, is to have a positive conversation. So what you don't want to do is ask a question that they have to say no to, because no is negative, no is not positive, or that they don't know the answer to, because then they feel stupid. That's not good either. Your goal is to make them feel good, positive. So you're not looking to trip them up. You're not, I read 10 years ago, this professor said this. You're not looking to test them or trip them up, or even put them in an uncomfortable situation of describing a negative situation. So really think that through. For example, like an example of the negative is like, what's a good example? Like how many Sloan students have successfully become entrepreneurs? I mean, we all know the number might be good, right? The number might be high, but what if it's not? What if it's not? Now they're like, well, we have 12 from the last class, but like really a lot of them tried, and then it's just like, it's negative, right? If you want to know about their entrepreneurial resources, you change it. And you talk about, I'm really excited about exploring how to create my own company. I was especially interested in what's the competition? The 100K used to be called the 50K. When I was there, it was 50K. Now it's 100K. The 100K. What are some of the student submitted ideas that have really gained traction? They'll know this for two reasons. The 100K is like a pride and joy of MIT and MIT Sloan. So they'll know it. It's like kind of but what I've also done, it's a good question for a few reasons. Number one, I've kind of like shown a little bit about me. I'm really interested in entrepreneurship. I heard about this. What are some of the examples? It's just like it's a nicer volley, right? Then how many people really get, really become successful entrepreneurs? Then the second one, the same with like, if you ask a question that's so hard, then they don't know. They'll know this one. If I said, I can't think of a good, Professor Stewart, again, I don't know if he's still a professor there, but I know a lot of stuff is written after him and named after him. Professor Professor Myers, he wrote 2 books. Is that second book still used in the classroom? Like, they won't know that. So focus it on things they know. If you haven't visited whatever research you have done, just like I kind of said, the entrepreneurial thing, like that's fair game. Maybe you could change it for whatever you want, right? If you want to get into strategy consultant, you could mention one of the labs, action learning labs. You could G Lab, E Lab, whatever you want. But you don't have to have gone there. Likewise, you could say, from everything I've gathered about Sloan, it just seems like a really collaborative and scrappy environment. And that really stands out to me. It makes me really excited. Has that been your experience as well? All I'm doing is making this statement, that's positive, by the way, and I'm turning it over to them to comment on. So again, you're embarking in a conversation, but you're more like giving them the floor to sell Sloan. But what I often say about this section is, even though I just said this, I'm gonna change myself. Even in the Q&A part, you are not shopping them. You are still letting them shop you. By giving them an opportunity to talk positively, they'll just have a better feeling of the conversation. I mean, I don't want you to go in be like, wow, I love Sloan. Do you love Sloan too? Like, don't be obvious, but give them an opportunity to sell what is great about Sloan and to have a good conversation with you.
Moving on to the next question. Does the visualization need to focus on your analytical ability? Example, a benchmarking analysis, or your ability to communicate that analysis to top management. Example, a waterfall chart.
Depends. It doesn't. They have no preconceived ideas of it should be this or that. I will always go back to, what is the story behind it? So the waterfall analysis, if it was hard to construct, you could even have a story where if it's a waterfall analysis, it was hard to get the data and then hard to explain, but you practice a number of times, practice with your managers. The third time you nailed it. That's a cool story. But what you're not necessarily doing is like, notice what I just said. I didn't actually say this waterfall analysis shows that, I don't know, whatever, 50% of the costs come from this, 80% come from this, 2% come from that, and 4% come from that. And that's my essay. That's not a story. They don't care about that as much. They care about you. You're applying. So think about what that data can reveal about you. So it can be a bar chart too. It doesn't matter. What did the bar chart enable you guys to do? What's the story there? That's what it all depends on.
Next question is like, after the interview is done, should there be any follow-up or something?
I never remember. I think, even as I was saying this at the beginning, you might get the contact info of the person. I think you do, in which case, so if the contact information of the person is made available to you in a transparent way, I would absolutely send a follow-up note. If they do not provide it in a readily available, transparent way, I would not. I would not hunt them down on LinkedIn afterwards and send them a note. You want to stay within the parameters, because if they haven't given you their contact information, they don't want you contacting them. And so I just don't know where Sloan is on that spectrum right now. So use it as a clue. But then assuming they do, absolutely, you do want to send a very short follow-up note, thanking them, and then commenting, not just saying like, thank you, that was very enlightening, which is fluffy and doesn't mean anything, right? I especially loved talking to you about the global lab, G Lab. I could really see that being a valuable way for me to pressure test my ideas of whatever in Southeast Asia, whatever it might be. Make it personal, make it specific, so that only you can be adding that like second or third sentence of your thank you note, and keep it brief too.
Okay, next question. How should applicants prioritize interview preparations once they receive the interview invite?
It's a good question. I mean, I think I would almost like look at those buckets. So there was like the essentials, the story questions, the challenge questions, and I would go in that order. Because it's kind of like, walk me through your resume, big picture, who am I? Often, why business goals? Like, this is like kind of like, so start there and then just weave in. And then, as you practice, some of our clients, they'll be like, I put together a 12-page document on all potential questions. I get that that's how some people prep. I don't prep like that. Like, it all depends on what your comfort level is. I would say you do not want to be reading from a script. If you do it in person, obviously you're not reading from a script. But if you're doing it in Zoom, it can be very tempting to have a script up. And I would not. But I know it often you need to practice out loud a number of times so that it's really like fluid and fluent in your head. So that's the other thing, is as you start practicing, I would encourage you to practice out loud. I'll share like 2 random things that I hear as I've done mocks recently. One is kinda. I hear kinda a lot. I kinda did this. We kinda did that. We kind of put together the presentation, and I kind of asked No. Even when I say it, you can probably notice it undermines the caliber of what I'm saying. It undermines my intention. It undermines me. It belittles me when I say, we kind of did this. Get rid of it. So if you find yourself, and it's a very common word, people use it all the time, but sometimes recording yourself, even like recording yourself in a way that you can do a transcript, you can look for those filler words. If you practice, you can be more intentional about avoiding them. If you run through a story a few times, you will get better. You noticed I had some I have ums mostly when I'm going something that's off the slide or responding to a question. I might have an because I haven't practiced it. It makes sense, but I want to help you avoid filler words, kinda, practice, you will be better at avoiding them. That's one tip. The other tip is that I want you to listen for. I call it when your experience. What I mean is often people will say, thinking of an example. I'll go with consulting. See, I'm going to have some ums here because I haven't practiced this. You're in consulting, and your question is, tell me about a project you're proud of. Yes, I was working on this healthcare case, and in healthcare, you have a lot of payers, you have a lot of insurance providers, you have a lot of data, you have a lot of stuff. I want you to, if you're somebody who use a problem, I want you to eye it. I was working on this healthcare problem. When we came in, we found an enormous amount of data. The client had so many different payers and so many insurance providers that the first thing I had to do was just make sense of it all. So what I call the Ewing is when you describe a macro problem instead of internalizing it and describing your problem or whatever it might be. I want you to think I, me, we when you're going into your interview and not you. So those are just two comments on that I didn't share, but that I often say when I conduct mock interviews.
Just last question. What are common questions students fail to answer?
What are common questions that what? What was that?
Students fail to answer.
Oh, fail to answer. That was the question. What do they fail to answer?
Yeah, like what are the kind of common questions a student might have troubling answer with?
I mean, I would say any of these questions. I spend a lot of time. All right, since I haven't mentioned this one, I think another one, any of these questions, honestly, you could and should spend a lot of time preparing for them. There's strategy behind how you want to tackle any one of these questions. As generic as walk me through your resume to tell me about a time when you were a leader on a team. Or, less so of you don't necessarily have to practice the why you made decision X to Y, but even those I would practice. But we didn't speak about this, why Sloan? And what's important to do when you hear the question, why Sloan? People often respond to the question that they're hearing, which I can completely empathize with. Why Sloan? Because it's, I really love the entrepreneurial focus. Sloan lets you do all these labs. I really like that. Sloan's scrappy community, I like. All you've done there is instead of hearing why Sloan, so that to me is an empty answer. And I wouldn't like that answer. It'd be generic, nothing that sticks about you. So if you hear the question, why Sloan or why any school, I want you to flip it in your head. And I want you to hear, what resources do I need to take advantage of at Sloan to reach my goals? That's it. Why Sloan? Well, I mentioned I want to be an entrepreneur. When I'm at Sloan, I will take advantage of courses like new product development and G-Lab to really get my hands dirty. I'm thinking, how can I build this new company? And then testing it out at the 100K club. So it internalizes the answer and helps you do a better job of painting who exactly you'll be on campus. So that's just another one that I see a lot of people mess up on until they start practicing.
So that was it. Thank you so much for the session. It was really insightful. Thank you all for joining the MIT session. And we hope that this session helps you feel more confident as you prepare for your application. Best of luck, and we look forward to see you at our more events. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Definitely good luck on your applications, your interview, wherever you are in this process. And please let Gatehouse Admissions know if we can help. But I'll be rooting for each and every one of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lisa.